The valley floor was a mire of thawing mud, a thick slurry that gripped the hooves of the roan horse with a sound like a dying breath. Rian kept his chin tucked against his chest, the brim of his battered hat pulled low to shield his eyes from the biting wind. It was that treacherous span between the silence of winter and the violent upheaval of spring, where the air smelled of wet rot and metallic ozone. Rian had been in the saddle for 3 days, carrying a heavy oilskin packet in his duster. The weight pressed against his ribs, heavier than the Colt Navy revolver on his hip. Inside was a debt of conscience, wages owed to a man who had been crushed in a silver mine 2 counties over. The dead man, Gian, had spoken of a wife and a scrap of land in this forgotten fold of the territory with his dying breaths. Rian was not a man known for charity, but he was possessed by a rigid sense of obligation. Debts were meant to be paid. The homestead revealed itself as the creek bent sharply east. It was a humble, gray structure that listed away from the wind, looking exhausted from the effort of standing upright. The perimeter fence was a disaster, broken where rails had rotted and sunk into the mire. The garden was a skeletal tangle of dead stalks. It was a place that screamed of absence, and Rian felt a familiar tightening in his chest, the dull ache of witnessing a losing battle. He reined the horse in by the ruins of the gate, swinging down with a groan of stiff leather. The silence was profound, broken only by the rushing creek and the wind hissing through a lone cottonwood. He tethered the roan and walked toward the barn, his boots sinking deep into the sodden earth, his spurs silent as mud caked the rowels. He found her not in the house, but in the dim shelter of the barn's overhang. May was seated on an overturned crate, her back to the entrance, her dark hair pulled into a severe braid. She wore a heavy woolen coat that was clearly her husband's, the sleeves rolled up in thick cuffs. Rian stopped 10 paces away, his hand hovering near his belt before dropping to his side. She was not armed. She was bent over something in her lap, her posture curved and fiercely protective. He cleared his throat, a rough sound that seemed violent in the quiet barn. She stiffened but did not panic. She turned her head slowly, her face pale and sharp-angled, eyes dark and unreadable. In her lap, nestled deep in the folds of the coat, were 3 kittens. Their eyes were barely open, blue and milky, and they were mewling, a tiny, fractured sound Rian hadn't heard over the wind. She held a rag dipped in goat's milk, pressing it to the mouth of the smallest one, a scrap of orange fur that looked more dead than alive. The sight stopped Rian cold. He had come expecting tears, anger, or the hollow stare of starvation. He had not expected this tenderness, this stubborn insistence on preserving a spark of life in a place determined to extinguish it. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice rusty. "I'm looking for the widow of Gian. They told me this was the claim." May looked at him, then down at the kittens, then back to him, her gaze lingering on his gun. "I am May," she said, her voice soft but steady. "He is gone." Rian took a step closer, the floorboards groaning. He felt massive and destructive, a creature of grit and iron intruding on something fragile. He withdrew the oilskin envelope. "I know," he said, placing it on a barrel beside her. "He worked the Copperhead claim. The timber gave way. This is his wage and a share of the find." May did not reach for it. She continued to dab the milk against the kitten's mouth. "The timber gave way," she repeated, testing the weight of the words. "He said the timber was green. He said it would not hold." "He was right," Rian admitted, the words costing him. "It didn't." He watched her hands, red and raw from the cold, yet precise and graceful. "Why?" he asked, nodding at the fur. "They're just mouths to feed. You don't have enough for yourself by the looks of it." May paused, tucking the orange kitten against her neck. "Their mother died in the frost last week," she said. They were crying. I could not let the silence be the only thing left here. The answer hung in the air. Rianne looked around the barn at the sway-backed mule and the patches of sky showing through the roof. The money was just paper. It couldn't fix a roof in the rain or plow a field. He should have turned around then. The debt was paid, but his boots felt nailed to the floor. "The fence is down," he said abruptly, "by the creek." "I know," May said. She placed the kittens in a straw-lined box and stood. She was tall, taller than he expected. "I cannot fix it. The posts are rotted. I do not have the strength to dig them out." It was a statement of fact, delivered with a cold dignity. She wiped her hands. "Thank you for bringing this. There is tea if you wish. It is weak, but hot." It was a formality, but Rianne nodded. He followed her into the clean, bare house. A small iron stove threw out a weak radius of heat. As she filled a kettle, Rianne stood by the door, hat in hand. "I can fix the fence," he said. The words were out before he could check them. He wasn't a laborer. He solved problems with lead. But the sight of her feeding those kittens had disarmed him. May turned, assessing him. "You are not a carpenter. Your hands are not made for wood." She glanced at the calluses on his trigger finger. "I am not," Ryan agreed, "but I can dig a post hole, and I can swing a hammer. The money will help you later, but the fence needs fixing now." She didn't smile, but the tension in her jaw relaxed. "There is stew," she said, accepting his offer. "It is mostly potato, but you are welcome to it." They ate in silence. The rain began to fall again, tapping against the roof. "You like them," he said. "The cats." May looked up, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "They are alive. Everything else here is fading, but they are color." She looked at him directly. "Why did you really come? Men do not ride 3 days in the mud just to deliver wages." "I don't trust the post," Ryan lied, "and I don't like leaving things unfinished." He slept in the barn that night, the kittens a pile of warm fur in the corner. The next morning he began to work. It was heavy, brutal labor. The posts were waterlogged, the mud fighting him for every inch. He worked with grim determination, the exertion a release for the tension coiling inside him. By mid-morning, May brought him water. She didn't speak, just watched him wrestle a new post into the earth. "It'll hold," he said, wiping sweat from his eyes. "It will hold," she agreed. She reached out, her hand hovering near his arm. "I will make bread for noon." The days fell into a rhythm. Rianne worked the fence, the roof, the woodpile. May tended the garden and the animals. The silence between them became a bridge rather than a wall. He learned the shape of her grief, and she learned the shape of his solitude, the way he scanned the horizon, the way he cleaned his gun by firelight. One afternoon a rider appeared on the ridge, a big man on a bay horse wearing an expensive coat. He rode right up to the porch where May was sweeping. Rianne didn't stop chopping wood, but he shifted his stance, his holster clear. "I told you, Mrs. Way," the man boomed. "The bank isn't a charity. We have a buyer. It's time to pack up." May gripped the broom handle. "This is my land. The deed is in my name. I am not selling." "A woman alone out here?" the man sneered. "Accidents happen. Fires happen." "Is that right?" Rianne's voice cut through the air. The man jerked upright, freezing when he saw Rianne standing 10 feet away. Rianne wasn't drawing, but his hands hung loose, his eyes terrifyingly calm. "Accidents," Rianne repeated, stepping closer. "They surely do happen, especially when folks trespass." The rider looked from the gun to Rianne's face and swallowed his bravado. "I didn't know she had help. I'm just delivering a message. Name's Voss." "Message delivered, Voss," Rianne said softly. "Now ride out." Voss turned his horse and fled. Rianne turned to May. She was trembling. "You didn't have to do that. I can handle them." "I know," Rianne said. but you don't have to handle them alone. Not today. He took the broom from her hand. Come inside. The wind is getting cold. That evening the air in the house was charged. Rianne sat by the stove, cleaning his revolver. May sat opposite, mending his shirt. She watched the gun, not with fear, but as a necessary tool. You have hands that know destruction, she said quietly. Rianne paused, the cylinder half-seated. They're the only hands I have. They've dug graves and filled them. He snapped the cylinder home. But today they built a fence. That has to count for something. May stood and walked to him. She reached out, her fingers resting lightly on his forearm. The contact was electric. It counts, she whispered. The man on the horse saw a killer. I saw a man standing between the wind and a candle. Do not think your hands are only for hurting, Rianne. The kittens know the difference, and so do I. Rianne looked up at her, the gun heavy and useless in his lap, feeling the weight of his loneliness cracking under her gaze. As spring truly broke, the mud dried. The kittens thrived, the orange runt now attacking Rianne's bootlaces with ferocious growls. Rianne found himself laughing, a rusty sound he hadn't heard in years. One morning, they turned the garden soil. Rianne drove the spade, May raked. The labor was a conversation. Rianne watched her bury seeds with reverence. You are staring, she said, shielding her eyes against the sun. I am, Rianne admitted. He walked over and knelt beside her. I was thinking this land is lucky, to have you bleed for it. He gently wiped a smudge of dirt from her jaw. She leaned into his touch. It is not the land that is lucky, she murmured. It is I who am lucky, to not be doing this alone. The work was eventually done. The fence was straight, the roof patched, the wood stacked. Rianne tested the gate. It swung smooth. It was a good gate, but it signaled the end. His excuse for staying was gone. He found May in the barn. She knew. The gate is fixed, he said to her back. May turned slowly. It is good work. Thank you. Her formality was a shield. You have been a kindness, Rianne, but if the road calls, you must go. I cannot hold on to smoke. She walked out, leaving him in the deafening silence. Rianne packed his saddlebags with angry, jerky movements. Every object felt like a betrayal. The morning of his departure was gray and misty. Rianne saddled the roan. May waited on the porch with a small bundle of food. She handed it to him, their fingers brushing. Be safe, Rianne, she said. May the wind be at your back. She stepped away. This was it. Rianne swung into the saddle. The world looked different from up here, cold, distant. He gathered the reins and looked down at her. She stood small and solitary, her chin lifted in defiant sorrow. Looking at the woman who had fed kittens when she was starving, Rianne realized the drifter who had ridden in 3 weeks ago was dead. The man on the horse was a fraud. I can't, he rasped. He dropped the reins. May's eyes widened. You can't what? Rianne swung his leg over and dropped to the ground, his boots thudding into the earth. He walked the 3 steps between them, invading her space. I can't ride out, he said, his voice shaking. The fence is fixed, but I'm not. I don't want the road, May. I want the garden. I want to see the kittens grow old. A tear tracked down her cheek. It is a hard life. There is no glory in it. I don't want glory, he said. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was a desperate, grounding collision of 2 lonely souls. It tasted of salt and mist and endurance. She gripped his coat, anchoring him to the earth. Rianne pulled back, breathless. I'll put the horse back in the stall, he said steadily. He's not going anywhere. No, May smiled through her tears. He is not. Rian walked the horse back to the barn. He unsaddled the animal, then deliberately unbuckled his gun belt. The heavy Colt felt alien now. He hung it on a high peg in the shadows. It was there if needed, but it was no longer a part of him. Just a tool, like the spade. He walked back into the light. May was waiting by the garden gate, the orange kitten perched on her shoulder. The wind blew soft, carrying the scent of growth. Rian walked toward her, his step light, his hands empty. He wasn't a gunslinger anymore. He was just a man walking toward a woman on land that needed them both. She held out a handful of seeds. "The corn," she said. "We need to finish the row." Ryan took the seeds. "We'll finish it," he said. "We have time." He knelt in the dirt beside her, a quiet victory of roots taking hold in the mud.